High intensity interval training, also called HIIT, is a great exercise in theory. In reality, this 15 to 20 minute exercise and sometimes even 7-minute exercise has a little bit of downsides involved. Doesn't mean that it's entirely bad, but it means that I do not recommend it for my clients at quality gains. I recommend them to stick to regular low intensity steady state cardio, the classic one. See, today I'm going to show you why HIIT is in theory a very good exercise, but in actuality it is deeply freaking flawed. Are you ready? Let's hit it. High intensity interval training was originally used for athletes until the media, meaning some companies, decided to use it for the general population. Essentially, it's a small solution for a rather big problem, literally speaking. In theory, HIIT training should create a rather big caloric deficit in a very short amount of time. So it's a very good time investment. But is this actually the case? See, how a training schedule should ideally be structured is by following these 3 steps. You can imagine it as baking a vegan cake. So what do you do when you bake a cake? Oops, that's a fly. So what do you do when you bake a cake? So you number 1, preheat the oven. Then you put the cake in the oven, you cook it, you bake it in that time, and then you cool down the oven. These 3 steps. And the same thing should happen when you train. Number 1, you do a warm-up. Number 2, you do the actual exercise. And number 3, you do a short cool down, depending on your intensity. A warm-up and cool-down are implemented because next to increasing your performance, they also decrease your risk of injury. This works because sweating is a good sign that you activated your sympathetic nervous system. So if you sweat in your warm-up, it actually means that when you train afterwards, your training will be likely harder and more efficient. The sympathetic nervous system is the fight or flight response in your body, and you actually want to have this feeling when you're training. Also, if you move your joints in your warm-up, they get slightly bigger. They get nurtured. The joints actually get nurtured by movement, by a thing called synovial fluid, and therefore it decreases your risk of injury. Plus, your warm-up changes the balance of your hormone. Your body secretes a hormone called glucagon, which increases your blood glucose concentration and therefore makes it easier for the muscle to take the glucose afterwards into their cells. So your body literally prepares for the exercise afterwards. Now, the higher intensity your exercise is, naturally the longer the duration of your warm-up and your cool-down needs to be. Why? Because a higher intensity exercise creates a bigger tear, a bigger damage in your body. So when in theory a HIIT session might only last about 20 minutes, the warm-up and the cool-down should be way freaking longer. So it's about the same duration even as the low-intensity steady-state cardio. So HIIT is suboptimal because in the popularized version it lacks a warm-up and a cool-down. But actually, if you take a look at how athletes are using HIIT, number 1, it's not freaking all the time, and if they use it, they implement a large warm-up and a large freaking cool-down. Why? Because especially good athletes, they're constantly freaking injured. They constantly have some sort of pain. So athletes are really anal about their warm-up practices. If you recommend athletes to do a high intensity exercise with no prior warm-up or no cool-down afterwards, I think that would be really freaking foolish, and you should question your career choices if you're a coach. Another downside is the whole nature of the HIIT marketing. It targets training beginners that want to lose excess pounds, completely ignoring the facts that beginners, like exercise beginners, they cannot exert themselves to that level which is needed for HIIT training. The way it works is that actually over time, the more experienced you become in the gym or in running, for example, cardio activities, your brain learns to activate its muscles properly, and the brain essentially realizes that even though you go to a high heart rate, it's not really detrimental for your organism. So you actually get used to pushing your body in the gym. When you're starting out in the gym, you're number 1, you maybe can't even hit that intensity, or number 2, you think you hit that intensity when in reality you're not. So matter of fact, the whole training, the HIIT training is not suitable for beginners. So I remember when I was about 16 years old, I wanted to lose some excess belly fat. I want to get to a six-pack for a very freaking long time. And a very experienced friend recommended high intensity interval training to me. So what I did, I woke up in the morning at 5:30 before school and I went for high intensity runs. Guess what happened? After 10 minutes, I threw in the towel because I simply could not handle the intensity. So I went back to bed sleep deprived. And this is actually a true story. So right now I could actually do high intensity interval training simply because I learned to exert myself in the gym. I learned to exert my body. But back then I didn't know how to do this properly. The chances are very high then that if you are watching this video, you're not at this stage yet. I think it takes at least 2 years until you know how to do this properly. 2 years of regular training. The third reason I do not recommend high intensity interval training is because of your negative effect on your weightlifting. So for those of you that lift weights regularly, high intensity interval training HIIT is not the best freaking thing. And these downsides come funnily enough from the core marketing message of this whole HIIT movement. It's called the afterburn. But in reality, the afterburn is not something that you really freaking want. In theory, the afterburn is something that you do the exercise and then it burns your fat while you're sleeping. In reality, the afterburn is not that big. It turns out to about 80 calories, which is about the same caloric amount than a regular soda. And what the afterburn truly is in exercise physiology terminology, it's that was a long word. It's excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, which means your body consumes more oxygen after the training than it does before, like more than its regular state. And why does your body do that? Because you created an oxygen debt in the first place. See, sometimes when our body needs to provide us with fast energy, it creates an oxygen debt, which means it burns through the storage so we can do the exercise. This is great in the moment, but afterwards your body needs to replenish that storage. That's why it needs a little bit more oxygen to do that. So what an excess post-exercise oxygen consumption or afterburn truly is an indicator of decreased performance levels of your organism. It's an indicator of a recovery state, which means this can impair your weightlifting performance and therefore can even lead to injuries if you don't address this. After a marathon, for example, the oxygen intake of an individual is increased for days, and this is not really a good thing. This is a sign of recovery. Moral of the story, I would recommend you to go for low intensity, steady state cardio, as it's low intensity, which means it can be performed every single day, and it even decreases your recovery time during weightlifting. Why? Because there's none to a very, very low oxygen depth involved in low intensity, steady state cardio. Conclusion, HIIT debunked. High intensity interval training is not something that I would recommend you based on the 3 reasons that I've outlined before. Number 1, the popularized version is time efficient, when in reality it actually should not be. The warm-up and the cool-down are completely left out. Number 2, beginners are not capable to reach that high intensity exercise level which is required for HIIT training, when in reality they think that they actually do. And also with that high intensity exercise there comes the risk of injury that you really do not want to have when you're just starting out with transforming your body. And the third reason, based on the principle of afterburn or the excess post-exercise oxygen consumption, is that the recovery time of the HIIT training is simply way higher than that of a low intensity steady state cardio. The recovery time is so big of the HIIT training that it can negatively impact your workout schedule, your weightlifting schedule. So what should you do right now? You choose a low intensity steady state cardio that is interesting for you, which means at this point, if you're completely physically unfit, if you're a big beginner, it's okay if you just go for a 30-minute walk. What matters is that you just get it started. When it comes to cardio in general, you first want to train as often as you can, then you train as long as you can in the individual exercises, and then you train as intense as you can. But first you always increase your training frequency and then the duration before you even think about intensity. If low intensity steady state cardio is too boring for you, then you can still listen to an audiobook or some funny podcast, or even do QG videos. I don't mind, would be great. Smash the like button. So actually implementing this low intensity steady state cardio was one of the breaking factors for me, how I first got a six pack in like 2016 it was. And it was freaking great. So if you also want to get in your best shape possible on a vegan diet and show people what vegans are capable of while being a positive example for a positive movement, then click the link down below. So far I've coached over 100 vegans in over 15 countries. So I'd love to be your coach. Okay guys, until next time. The mission of this YouTube channel is to put veganism across the goal line. If you want to help us achieve that, like and subscribe to this channel, and don't forget to hit the bell icon. Let's make food production great again.